This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. Hi. What do you guys want to talk about? This is such good shit. Thanks, guys. Back to you.
Well, this should be a semi-normal Monday show. Only partially, though, because apparently WWE is still in end-of-the-year vacation mode. I'll talk about that in a minute. But to those that are seeing this channel for the first time, we are beginning a new year on the FSWR channel. It is January 1st. So, Happy New Year? Is that a thing people still celebrate? I don't know. It's kind of like Christmas, you know? Like every year people ask me how my Christmas was, and every year it's the same answer. It was a day. I don't know. Guess when you're older, it just doesn't mean as much as it did when you were a kid. It's kind of how the new year is for me in a lot of ways. I'm not one of those dorky nut jobs that buy a ticket to go see the ball drop in New York City. You kidding me? You couldn't get me to touch New York again with a 10-foot pole. Been there, done that, brother. Never going back to that garbage state again. You can have it. People are crazy, though, man. There are people that legitimately take time out of their schedules every year to buy a plane ticket or even travel large stretches of miles in a car, buy a hotel room, immerse themselves in all that chaos, literally to watch a clock change from 11:59 p.m. to 12 a.m. Have I ever mentioned how dumb people are? Well, that's America for you. So, what do you guys want to talk about? Me sitting here calling people stupid for going to watch the ball drop every year. Yeah, I'm about to sit here in like 5 to 10 minutes to talk about Retro Raw from 1995. The hell am I doing with my life? Yeah. Pot calling the kettle black much? Well, you know, at least Retro Raw is an educational experience. It is a list of how not to book a professional wrestling product. It's usually the message I get out of it. We'll get into all that calamity in a few minutes. Before we get into the actual reviews, let me take a detour real quick with SmackDown from Friday night. I mean, I didn't even take into account the possibility that it was just going to be a yearly recap show. So I kind of lucked out. Apparently Monday night was the same thing for Raw. I mean, considering it was Christmas, that wasn't really all that surprising. So there really wasn't a whole lot for me to talk about this week. Nothing of substance happened. It's hard to really review a show like this unless I wanted to sit here and nitpick apart all the collection of tapes they put together for this show. If you have a strong connection with matches like John Cena versus Solo Sikoa from Crown Jewel, or Sami Zayn and KO beating the Usos to win the tag titles at WrestleMania Night 1, I'm sure those matches were fun to go back and relive. You know, same thing goes with Logan Paul beating Ray for the US title not too long ago. I wouldn't really consider those match of the year candidates. I mean, those weren't even in consideration when I was putting together my top 15. Sami and KO winning the tag straps, I think, was more about the moment than the actual match. I can maybe argue it should have made my list, but I mean, when I factored in how horribly their title reign was botched, kind of booted it from the list a little bit. They also re-aired Cody and Roman from Mania, and that's another quote-unquote polarizing match for a lot of people out there. You know, I didn't hate that match, and it just didn't make my top 15 because I kind of knew there was more to the story that was still being followed up on. Kind of sucks that they used their Night 2 WrestleMania main event this year as a plot device to set up what will ultimately end up being this year's WrestleMania event, more than likely. But, you know, WWE's done stuff like that before. I mean, they did the same thing with Rock and Cena over a decade ago. I think that was more of a retrospective evaluation. A lot of people hated that finish, dude. People were crapping all over it. Admittedly, I wasn't entirely sold on it at the time, just with the way the whole thing was booked. I don't know, like even looking back now, it was too much of a paint-by-numbers Roman finish. Like, you want to have him retain the belt, that's fine, but there really wasn't anything all that memorable or preeminent with that finish just separated from any of the laundry list of Roman's previous title defenses. So I wasn't a fan of that. And the match was more or less from what I remember. Like, I don't remember having a strong urge to seek it out later in the year to relive the moment. You know, but I think if anything, it was a good cliffhanger to go out on this week. There's that momentary flash of disappointment when you see Cody lose, like the whole post-match reaction and everything that transpired afterwards. We'll just ignore the rubber chicken. But at the same time, it does kind of leave you cautiously optimistic as we kind of transition into Mania season this year. Maybe we'll actually see Cody finish the story at WrestleMania 40. It's always hard to gauge what will happen in 2 to 3 months down the road in wrestling anymore, especially with how constantly people are getting hurt. But if the end game is Roman versus Cody Part 2, it was good foreshadowing. But overall, that's kind of all there is to say. It was a recap show. LA Knight was fun to listen to in the opening 4 minutes. I mean, that guy's a fucking megastar waiting in the wings that'll probably never get a fair shake in WWE. And we saw how he blew up in popularity throughout the year, coming off the heels of that Bray Wyatt debacle. So what happened? They fed him to Roman Reigns. But we'll see. I mean, the rumor was that he was being positioned to wrestle Logan Paul in Mania this year. I mean, that'd be worth it just to hear the promo battles. So that was SmackDown. Their supposed year-in-review show. Now, the one thing we'll have to monitor here on the channel in 2024 is what ends up happening with the possibility of them moving SmackDown to a different night. It's already confirmed that they're moving to the USA Network in October. So for the time being, we'll stick with the SmackDown reviews in 2024. I can't promise the same thing after the switch to USA, though. Because if they move off of Friday nights and go to like a Tuesday or something, I mean, that's going to completely fuck with the formatting of our podcasts. You know, not to say we couldn't shift things around. I've done it before. Kind of like the formatting of the way we're doing things now. It's easier with my work schedule. I'm not, how you say, passionate about the SmackDown recaps. It's not necessarily my favorite thing that we do on the channel. You know, at the same time, though, it does help counterbalance the classic content we talk about. And if I want to keep reviewing the modern WWE stuff, you know, having SmackDown in the cycle is kind of helpful in tracking what the hell's actually going on, so I don't go into everything blind. Because we don't watch Raw, and I still refuse to. Ain't happening. But we'll go ahead and monitor everything throughout the year. For the time being, we'll keep the format as is. But, that was something I had thought about watching this show, so I figured I'd briefly mention it. So what do you say we move on with the rest of the show? Let's get into some classic content. Oh boy. Well, there's no going back now. We've dipped our toe into the cesspool. And now we have to commit. Welcome one and all to absolute hell. Better known as WWF Raw from 1995. We've reached the timeline. And I have PTSD just thinking about the horrors that lie ahead. And we're going to relive it all for the next 12 months. You'll be taking the slow, treacherous ride with me. And then we'll see if we come out on the other end alive. All signs point to no. Barely made it through 94 without ripping my hair out. God, even as I went back and updated the graphics for the new year, I was looking at all these various pictures from WWF in 95. I'm just reminded of all the horrible shit that's upcoming. I'm almost having a brain aneurysm just thinking about it. Well, let's just see how bad things were on this January 2nd edition of Monday Night Raw from 1995. Well, they had Bam Bam on the image capture, so it was not proximate horrible news. At least Bam Bam could work. And unfortunately, he wasn't going to be enough to save this one. I knew shit was about to hit the fan the moment Jeff Jarrett announced that he was going to be doing a live concert performance. That was the omen right there. The moment we all should have known WWF was doomed in 1995. When Double J opened up the first Raw of the year by announcing he was going to sing. Could have stuck a fork in her right there. No, Vince definitely picked the right night to be under the weather. Poor Gorilla Monsoon got stuck doing commentary with Shawn Michaels for this one. I'm sure he was just filled with nothing but elation when he found out about that news. So we go to the ring for the opening bout. Kicking things off with tag action. The match is Bam Bam Bigelow and Tatanka versus Lex Luger and the British Bulldog. And the heels didn't even wait for Davey Boy to get down to the ring before they immediately jumped Luger. A lot of bad blood there, as we know. But the match had a pretty simple layout. Once Bulldog ran out and helped Luger fight off the heels, they slowed it down for a while. Heat on Luger for about an hour. Bulldog is standing on the apron, desperately trying to get people to care about this thing. And ironically, he did get them to start a chant. They were chanting, USA. And meanwhile, there's Davey Boy standing there in UK apparel. That was amusing. And eventually Luger caught Bam Bam with a power slam so he could tag in Bulldog for the comeback. Bulldog hit Tatanka with a running power slam for a near fall, but DiBiase pulled Tatanka out to the floor. And then things kind of broke down with all four guys, leading to Hebner doing a count out. And that's when the retirement home emptied out from the locker room to try to separate everybody. In its plainest terms, this was a long, boring tag match that was about 90% heat, 5% comeback, and 5% fucked finish. So you can fill in the blank on whether or not you thought it was any good. Tatanka is getting slower and slower the more I watch of him in the ring. Like at one point here, Sean made a joke about Tatanka looking like he was bulking up. I just figured the guy was getting fatter, but maybe I'm just an asshole. Yeah, not what you would call a great start to the new year in 1995. The first match of the year ending in a double countout. And it was far from the worst thing to come on the show. Now, the worst thing was Todd Pettingill announcing during the Royal Rumble card update that the tag match would resume later on. Now, normally, I'm one to skip over these Pettingill pay-per-view rundowns, mostly because I lose brain cells every time I hear the man speak. But I wanted to watch this one just to sort of see if I could remember the entire 1995 Royal Rumble layout based on what they had already announced for the card. Aside from the actual Rumble match, the only one I got right was Diesel versus Bret Hart for the WWF title. I had completely forgotten about everything else. I forgot about the tag team tournament they were doing at the time. I forgot about IRS versus The Undertaker. Even though I've been ranting about how horrible those IRS VTRs have been. I also forgot about Double J versus Razor Ramon for the Intercontinental title. I also had no recollection of Pamela Anderson being the guest celeb for that pay-per-view. But, well, I do remember when Baywatch was all the rage back in the 90s. I guess it made sense here, figuring the show was happening in Tampa, Florida at the Sun Dome. Because that's what you think of when you think of Royal Rumble, right? Yeah, you picture beaches and swimsuit models and scampy clothing. Right. Yeah, it's not like WWF had a summer-themed pay-per-view that would have been way better suited for that model. But what do I know? So then we had Duke the Dumpster Droese beating Mike Bell in a very short squash that still went about 90 seconds too long. He won with the trash compactor. No one gave a fuck. And then they shot a quick vignette for the repackaged debut of Kama Mustafa. Although they did not include the Mustafa part here. He was just Kama in the graphic. And he had several gimmick incarnations during his WWF run. Trying to run through some of them in my head here, but of course now I'm drawing a blank. Let's see, this was 95. So they already would have done Papa Shango. That only lasted about a year. What was that, 91, 92? And then that gimmick totally fell off the map. He comes back here in 95, being repackaged as some type of motorcycle riding MMA shoot fighter, which was miles better than Papa Shango. Then I remember he gets involved with the $1 Million Corporation somehow. I think we'll see some of that unfold on TV before not too long. Then by 97, they're sticking him with the Nation of Domination and doing that whole thing. Of course, we all remember The Godfather. I actually kind of forgot about how many different character incarnations that guy went through. He was like the Barry Darso of the 90s. How many random fucking gimmick changes can we give one guy before we finally run out of ideas? Well, I can assure you, this one did not last long either. And from there, we went back to the ring for a semi-King's Court segment with Jerry Lawler. I say semi because it didn't have as many bells and whistles as a typical King's Court segment, for better or worse. He introduces Owen Hart as his special guest for the week. I believe that ranks Owen as the single most recurring guest on Lawler's talk show since the beginning. And we've seen a lot of Owen-Lawler promo exchanges lately. Of course, they're great heels, so they banter together, and it's always top-notch. But I noticed it when Owen came out here, how often he ends up being one of Lawler's special guests for these things. And of course, this is all centered around the controversy of the Survivor Series title match with Brett and Backlund. Owen's talking about how it was all part of a masterful plan, suckering his family into thinking Owen actually had compassion for his brother Brett. I will say, it was only slightly annoying hearing Shawn and Gorilla constantly interject while these guys were trying to talk. But Gorilla had one good line here where Lawler's in the middle of putting over Owen's performance at the pay-per-view. And before he can even finish his thought, right as Lawler goes, "Owen, your performance at Survivor Series," Gorilla just shouts, "was disgusting." Absolute perfect timing. And again, Owen's running down the gauntlet of everything that happened, how he pulled the wool over everybody's eyes, talking about all of Brett's credentials, being a former tag team, IC, and world champion. And Owen's going to be all of those things in the year 1995. But unlike Brett, he won't lose the belts. And again, it was good heel stuff from both guys. Shawn and Gorilla were slightly irritating, talking over them at various points. And the other main message to come out of this was Owen announcing that he was going to be one of the 30 participants in the Rumble match, which didn't sit well with Shawn, obviously. Again, though, it's just a reminder of how, even at this point in January of 95, they're still working the Owen-Brett feud on TV. It's a shame we never really get much of a finality to the feud. I think they wrestle like one more time on TV, which Brett obviously wins. After that, they pretty much never acknowledge this feud again. Remember, Owen goes on to do the tag thing with Yoko. Brett does the match with Diesel at the Rumble, the Mania match with Backlund to finish off that feud, and then they eventually rehash the stuff with him and Lawler later on. I mean, we'll get to all of that. But as for the Owen versus Brett, what was easily WWF's feud of the year in 1994, they just kind of shoved it under the rug and moved on. I wish they would have shoved this Double J shite under the rug and move on. But no. They had to subject us to this horse pie. Even Road Dogg wasn't entertaining enough to save this utter catastrophe. Well, before we talk about all the post-match stuff, Jarrett had a match with Buck Quartermain, and that was mostly highlighted by Shawn jacking off at the commentary booth, making fun of Gorilla for calling a crotch grab spot, and making alcohol jokes about all the frat boys that get hammered around the New Year's. He actually said, "WWF talent, do not get involved in that." Yeah, right. Because WWF never got into any legal trouble with substance abuse. Nah, that was just unheard of in the mid-90s. Yeah, right. So, Double J won that. And then we came back for his music set. Air quotes around that. Because as we all know, Double J is a wonderful musician with a platinum record-selling album. And the whole thing has turned the channel heat. They're stalling for time by having Jeff yell at the production truck to bring the house lights down. And they're fucking with the microphone, doing fake tests. Yeah, Jeff calling for them to turn the house lights down and then get a spotlight on him. And like, okay, in theory, it's a relatively good way to get heat on the guy. But then it goes on for like 5 excruciating minutes. getting more pissed off the longer the charade goes on. Gorilla Monsoon outright asked, "Where's Kevin Dunn when you need him?" My guess would be chopping on some carrots, but what do I know? I'm literally begging for these people to cut the feed. And finally, after they started manipulating the microphone settings so it kept peaking, Jeff and the roadie just leave because they got fed up with everything. And that is where I wrote down, I hate the show with a passion. I'm already over 1995. And we have not even surpassed week 1. We have 51 more of these goddamn motherfuckers. I'm already losing it. And then, no sooner should I say that, who should appear on screen but Dave Osborne? And who is David Osborne? I have no fucking clue. Apparently a stuntman of some description. He was plugging a TV show or something. Clearly reading off a teleprompter. Talking about how great and exciting his new show is. I mean, I really wasn't paying attention to it. Sounded like a Tony Khan promo on Dynamite. Everything's great and exciting. While he's looking like a deer in the headlights, reciting shit on the screen. Seriously, that's what David Osborne looked like. By the way, we were 38 minutes into the show by the time this aired. Wanted to reach through my TV and grab this dude by the throat. I was so angry. And then with like 5 minutes left in the show, we go back to the ring to resume the tag match that ended in a double countout in the opener. Because apparently it was so important that we get a finish to that match. They said, let's do it again. Even though nothing was on the line and nobody cared about it prior to the initial fucked finish. It was not good the first time around. So why not? Let's do it again. And as God is my witness, I swear, I thought I jumped in a time machine. The entire bulk of that opening 11-minute match was Lex Luger getting worked over by the heels. So they come back from commercial. The tag match is already in progress. They're getting the heat on Lex Luger again. Fuck. No wonder this fucking guy wanted out of his contract. Are you kidding? They were getting the heat on Lex Luger a second time. It's like we never left. We were right back where we started 40 minutes ago. My fucking God. How do people watch this? So as they're making Luger look like the world's biggest geek, at one point Sean outright says, "This match feels like it's been going on all night." I believe that was coded language for, "This match sucks. Why is it still going?" I keep thinking back to a couple years ago when Luger was the most heavily pushed babyface on this show. Now in 95, he spends an entire episode of Monday Night Raw selling for 2 underneath heels in a tag match. Then finally at the end, after the Davey Boy comeback, bailing out that idiot Luger for a second time in one night, they do a miscue spot with the Tonka and Bam Bam. Bulldog runs wild for a bit. Luger ends up taking out Bam Bam to the floor. And then Bulldog rams Tatanka into Bam Bam on the apron so he can stack him up and pin him. Then they had the balls to have Luger high-five Davey Boy afterwards. Like, yeah, we did it. I'm like, fuck you, dude. You didn't do shit. You got destroyed in both matches. Had to have Davey Boy bail you out twice. Now you're celebrating like you guys just won the tag straps? Give me a break. Awful show. Just a fucking putrid show from top to bottom. And I guarantee you, this is not even the worst of what's to come. This was only bad by 1995 Raw standards. Oh, just wait until we get into later in the year, dude. I mean, we're like 3 weeks away from the 95 Rumble, too. If this show was supposed to help generate enthusiasm for that pay-per-view, mission failed. The only thing I took away from this one was Jeff Jarrett's gimmick sucks, Lex Luger's booking is beyond embarrassing, and Shawn Michaels continues to validate why, even at the age of 8 years old, when I was watching this for the first time, still couldn't stand this guy on my TV. Not the good kind of heel hatred. It's the get off my TV, I don't want to see you, you annoy me type of hatred. Whatever people were calling X-Pac heat back in the day, HBK heat preceded that long before. Just remember that. Especially as we plod through the 1995 timeline. So that brings us to Retro NXT. And we're talking about all these banner years in classic wrestling. NXT in 2014. Well, it was actually one of the bigger milestone developments for the brand. In addition to the launching of the takeover specials, which we'll hear more about in weeks to come, this is really kind of the year the popularity of the NXT brand took off. You know, it still predates the television network era, where they started treating the show as more of a third brand extension than an actual developmental brand. But there are a lot of big things that happened in just this 1 year. We're already seeing the rise of Sami Zayn, you know, the pathway they're going to get him back into the title hunt again. Just wait until Kevin Steen shows up. But, yeah, I remember 2014 being a relatively exciting year when I think back. I'm sure there will be things that give me revisionist history. But the 2013 recaps taught me anything. It wasn't all sunshine and unicorns like we were led to believe. No, I think we were blinded by a lot of the subpar material. Probably just because of how horrible things were on the main roster around the time. We were so desperate to clamor onto anything watchable. So we'll see how this retrospective turns out for 2014. But, now why don't we dive into this one? Where we kick things off with Byron Saxton informing us that Tyler Breeze has entered the building. That was all. That was literally the entire announcement. Like he was fucking Elvis. Now, I actually vaguely recall them running with that little storyline for a while. Like, they would keep mentioning when Breeze would enter and exit the building, but they never actually showed him doing so. It was just a spontaneous thing they would do during the program. So we go to the ring for Alexander Rusev versus Kofi Kingston. I believe they actually promoted this 2 weeks ago during that backstage pre-tape on NXT episode 200, or whatever it was. And I did not have to inflict the New Day role here, because there were no pancakes or trombones involved. It was just a good old-fashioned Kofi Kingston underdog babyface squash. You know, with Kofi being the one getting squashed. Joking aside, no, I actually like when WWE utilizes main roster guys to help work with the developmental guys. Like even a guy like Kofi, who, let's be honest, they weren't doing jack shit with him creatively on the main roster at the time anyway. But you stick him in there with a guy like Rusev, have him go a few minutes with Kofi valiantly fighting back and trying to use some veteran instinct to catch Rusev off guard. Like, you actually buy that a guy like Kofi could believably beat Rusev in this case. And it's not like Rusev beating one of the generic job guys on the NXT shows. Like, Kofi's actually a valuable name with experience. And yeah, they use Lana to distract Kofi so Rusev could press slam him off the top rope and then win with the accolade. But I thought it was a good use for a guy like Kofi. Gave Rusev a notable name to get a win over. I mean, again, you can already see they got big plans in the works for him on the main roster not too long from now. You know, just the fact that they're sending main roster guys down to do jobs for him. You already knew Vince was scouting them. And they had a good thing going there. Until they fucked it all up. By having him lose to John Cena on like 3 straight occasions. Yeah, because that was a good idea. Fucking retards. Could have made him their top heel world champion if they would have just gotten off the Cena superiority complex, but they just couldn't help themselves. No, more apropos, Vince couldn't help himself. But, hey, look what happened with Bray Wyatt. Same exact deal. So then we had our weekly installment of We Could Do More Than One Take, but we refused to skits. With hideous bad acting aplenty. Here we had Sylvester LaFour trying to acquire a new protege for his Legionnaires Club. Sounds like he was trying to recruit somebody for a local gay bar. And, I mean, the whole thing's incredibly over-rehearsed. Bull Dempsey walks in from off camera, but LaFour calls him too fat. Oh, shoot, I don't have my Scott Steiner audio queued up. Elsewise, I'd use it. I think this was Bull's debut. I try to tell you something right there. What they thought of the guy. And then Mason Ryan showed up. Chiseled out of fucking granite. Complete with the personality of a block of wood. And he recited some scripted lines while looking directly into the teleprompter off camera. And, I don't know. LaFour tried to offer him money, but Ryan shoved the bill in LaFour's mouth. Then he muttered some stuff in French. Again, I will reiterate what I said earlier. This was not the glory period of NXT that we all remember it being. There was plenty of bad shit too. A lot of it getting overlooked, unfortunately. That was followed with Natalya versus Emma. Winner earning a Divas title shot against whoever the champion was. I think Paige. Nobody cares. By the way, with hindsight now being 2020, can we all finally acknowledge just how stupid Emma's gimmick was in NXT? This stereotypical ditzy blonde chick that pops bubbles and looks one fry short of a Happy Meal all the time. How in the hell did we go several years without pointing out how dumb that gimmick was? I mean, that's not even taking into account the stupid dance she does. Now that we realize just how insufferable she was as an employee with the company when she worked there. Constantly getting into trouble with the law, bad attitude, shitty personality. No wonder they fired her. I still never understood why people liked her. I always thought she sucked. Natty's always solid. Never had a bad thing to say about her. Emma looked like a drunken teenager with the way she was moving in the ring, but Natty tried. She really tried. You know, the problem with Emma, she's got that indie mindset where all of her moves have to take like 8 minutes to set up. Everything looks way too complex. Like Natty at one point had Emma hooked up in some kind of modified bow and arrow. That looked awesome. Should have been the fucking finish. But of course, Emma had to go over, so they broke that spot up so Emma could come back and then win with a bridging last chancery. And they've been teasing the Emma Page thing for a while, so sure. Guess it had to happen eventually. I just wish they could have used someone other than poor Natalya to beat here. What was Summer Rae doing this week? Couldn't beat her. So that was that match. Other than my comments about Emma's gimmick, I got nothing to add. So then we come to the actual low point of this week's episode. Now, the girls' match was just bad. This was an abortion to all humanity. This fucking sing-off, fap-off segment with Big Cass and Aiden English. God, the levels of turn the channel heat that existed here. I don't even know where to begin. Well, first off, just a recap in case you didn't see the last couple NXT reviews we did. Enzo Amore broke his leg at a house show, so he's going to be out recovering while Cass is stuck working singles matches. So, you know, rather than simply pushing Cass as a monster babyface and have him destroy people in like 15-second squashes, you know, something productive. No, instead, it's WWE, so they have to make him an underneath comedy act. So now he's coming out to the ring to do sing-alongs on a pro wrestling show with another guy who is also doing terrible underneath comedy. So already my blood is boiling. And, well, to preserve my life, so that I don't jump out the window that's approximately 5 feet next to me, they both do the sing-off. It's fucking horrible. Aiden English did some Italian opera motif. I didn't even care to write down what it was. And then Cass sang Danny Boy, mildly impressively, although it was still a mid-performance at best. As a professional musician, I was gravely offended. And the crowd voted Cass the winner. So Aiden clipped Cass's knee from behind and then stomped the shit out of him. I presume to set up a singles match. Wow. What a payoff. Criminal. Whoever booked this segment, I hope they were arrested on the spot. So then we had Totally Not on the Gas Mason Ryan versus Tyler Breeze, wherein the finish was made immediately apparent when Sylvester LaFour was hanging out at ringside. Didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out where that finish was going. And it was marvelous. Mason drapes Breeze over the top rope. He then slides out from under the bottom rope on the opposite end of the ring. He clotheslines LaFour, and then he slides back into the ring and eats a beauty shot spin kick from Breeze for the 3 count. Say it with me, y'all. Geek. Then we had the main event. Oh, yes, and how could I forget? Tyler Breeze has left the building. Good for him. So the match is Leo Kruger versus Sami Zayn. 2 out of 3 falls. I guess we can call Leo Kruger the hitman on behalf of Antonio Cesaro. He's been trying to push Kruger to take out Sammy as of late. But that never say die attitude of Sami Zayn. He just won't stay down for the count. Now, this has mostly been a way for them to keep the Cesaro-Zayn program going, but still trying to keep them apart while they milk the program and then rekindle it later on. Kruger, I guess you could just call the unfortunate fall guy in the whole thing. But, this actually ended up being relatively enjoyable. A little bit of a detour from the standard 2 out of 3 fall stipulations. They actually had Sammy go over in 2 straight pins, which is something we were not accustomed to seeing at the time, especially in the land of hotshot 50-50 booking in WWE. But I liked how they structured it. They had Kruger go after Zayn from the opening bell. They were teasing that Kruger was going to go up 1 fall from the onset, but Zayn fought back and then caught Kruger with the haluva kick in the corner to score the first pin, immediately getting that classic WWE infomercial pitch. NXT rolls on. Gotta love it. And we come back with Kruger shoving Zayn off the top rope to the floor in a relatively scary-looking bump. Looked like he came down and landed on his elbow, which the announcers drew attention to. But they had Kruger work over Zayn for a while. He went for multiple pin attempts and submission attempts, but Sammy kept fighting out. Eventually led to Kruger catching Zayn with a double-A spine buster. And as he goes to try to set him up for the lariat, Zayn caught him and then ended up submitting Kruger with the Koji clutch. Great. Zayn wins 2 falls to 0. Again, they're gearing up for that huge blow-off with him and Cesaro soon. In a way, you kind of had to smash him over here to rebuild some of that momentum he previously lost after the NXT title loss to Bo. So, I liked it. Again, the Leo Kruger gimmick was pretty much dead in the water by this point. I think they started airing vignettes for Adam Rose not too long after this. So this might be the last time we see Kruger under this current incarnation. But, yeah. Good, solid main event. Right guy won. Sammy's one of the hottest attractions on this show right now. And it keeps getting bigger and bigger with each passing week. That fan craving to see him win the big one. I mean, they're taking their good old time getting there, but, it did end up paying off in the end. All in all, guess you could call this a mixed bag show. Main event was good. The Rusev-Kofi match was solid, although unspectacular. Everything else in the middle was pretty dreadful, all things considered. Even by NXT standards. Again, the acting on the show is downright atrocious at times. I mean, to the point where you're asking yourself, this is a multi-million-dollar enterprise with the highest paid production staff to ever host a wrestling product. How in the fuck did they permit this stuff to air in one take? Again, I get how Vince was back in the day. He had to micromanage everything down to a T. Couldn't even let the boys and girls cut their own promos without literally reciting lines. But at some point you have to ask yourself, how can people even watch this shit without cringing? This is like glow levels of bad acting. It's incredibly frustrating. It's 2 entirely different worlds in NXT during this time. It's the promo world versus the in-ring product world. In the ring, the action was mostly fine. And with the right agents and the right people working together, the matches and angles weren't the main problem. But God, the promos. Promos are just rotten. Beyond rotten. And they don't get any better over the next decade, people. I can promise you that. So far, good start for NXT in 2014. It's a far cry from the glory years, but yeah, they're moving up the ladder, and progress is progress, you know. And with that said, that'll wrap everything up for this one. So thanks everybody for tuning in to watch the show. A little bit on the shorter side this time, but hey, them's the breaks. We'll be kicking off the new year, going forward with the classic show on Friday. Next Monday, we'll be back to the regular format here. And I guess the big thing to keep on your radar in the next few weeks is the Royal Rumble recaps. And again, we're doing the retro WWF stuff too, so we'll have that one, and we'll have the regularly scheduled Royal Rumble on the cock. So I'll have to block out some time to make sure I sit down and watch the 95 Royal Rumble. Oh boy, we'll see how that goes. So thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. Peace out.